Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Kitabi Qisse. For those who do not speak Hindustani, it means bookish tales. And I am so excited to bring together two people today who are fully and completely into books and literary culture. And you see on the screen here Suhani Parikh and Ambika Sambasivan, and they are wonderful, wonderful people behind two incredibly successful and known South Asian publishing houses. And before I share more, I am going to quickly ask both Suhani and Ambika to tell us who they are, what they do, just as an introduction to everyone. And so on to you, Suhani and Ambika.
Go first, Suhani.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Suhani Parikh, and I founded Modern Marigold Books in 2019. I got into this work because I found myself for the first time not working outside the home and being home with my two daughters, and um, just finding an opportunity to really let my creativity soar. And I've always been really drawn to writing and reading and books. And so I got the spark of an idea to write a children's book based on some of my own life experiences. And it sort of just moved forward very organically from there. We I continued on to self-published three books, and then I started working with my first author and transitioned Modern Marigold Books to a traditional publishing company, and from there worked with three separate authors to publish their own stories. And about a year and a half or so ago, connected with Ambika, who's the founder of Yali Books, and we found a lot of similarities in our values and in our goals as mothers and as business owners and as publishers. And so, very happy to say that we co-founded a new publishing company, Sambasivan and Parikh, that is as of this past year. And so we are now working together, and I'll let her talk about Yali Books a bit, but our companies are now imprints under our new publishing company. So that's a little bit about me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ambika Sambasivan. I'm the co-founder of Yali Books and now the co-publisher and founder at Sambasivan and Parikh, and very excited to be here. So Yali Books began in 2014 with our first book, Bye Bye Mota Bhai. And that was a collaboration with my mom, who's a writer based in India. And she had a story that she kind of gave it to me saying, hey, try your hand at illustrating this. And I'm not an illustrator. That's not my background at all. And I had just had so much fun working with my mom that we decided to self-publish. We decided to take this further, build out a brand, and actually open it up to other authors as well. And from then on, we've not looked back. We've had such a blast working in publishing. It's been amazing. The journey has been so fulfilling for us that we've learned so much. We've worked with wonderful people, and we hope to do this, till we can. As long as we
I
can
love
do this,
that.
we would love to do this. It's
I
been
love
an
that.
honor
I
to
mean,
work with.
two
So
things that
many.
I'll mention that you guys were saying. One on how your journey began, because I see a lot of people in the community who do begin with self-publishing because
Correct.
publishing can seem like a black hole that you don't know how to like approach it. And seeing your success and how you sort of graduated that to what was fulfilling and what made sense, and to become, or rather to become, this brand new publishing house, and then even having an imprint as you guys partner is very encouraging. And it's also something that I don't know how often I see publishing people who look like the way they do right now, which means South Asian publishing people and women on top, because it's an industry that still very much is not diverse. I think there's a long road before we get to a place where we see more people like us who are in these fields. And so that itself encourages me. I've worked in newsrooms where I literally was the only person who looked like me. So I cannot tell you how empowering it feels to see you both and have this whole journey. So, you talked a little bit about, you both were touching on, you one started with your mom, and Suhani, you were talking about your own parenting experiences. So, I speak to a lot of parents who have these moments, and I'm one of them, who have these moments saying, hey, we need to do something different, and, this story needs to get out. What was driving this, like, business wise? Like, were you like thinking this is going to become one big business one day? And like, what was the, how, what were you using to motivate yourselves when you began?
Ambika, go ahead. You can start this one. Unless you want me to
Well,
start.
there is an age-old joke in publishing that, how do you make a small fortune in publishing? You start with a big fortune. So publishing is not for people. It's not to make money and grow into a big business. And of course, there are corporates in publishing, not to say that it isn't a big business, but at the grassroots level, it's really driven by a love of books. And love of books and love of storytelling, and wanting to share culture, heritage, and concepts with children, with readers. And I think that's essentially the book making, and the knowledge, passing on of knowledge has to drive you. We would love to see it to be a sustaining business, like a successful business in terms of it sustains itself. But I don't think we have grand ambitions of taking over the world or anything.
Yeah, I think Ambika hit the nail on the head with that. It's not really about building a big business. It's about the quality of the work and doing something that really resonates with you and that is important to you to, leave your legacy behind in the world and what it looks like. So for both of us, it really is to share stories, to make an impact through our work, and we never really even saw. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I at every stage of growth for Modern Marigold Books and now for Sambasivan and Parikh, I never foresaw that. I didn't say like, oh, and this is what I want it to look like, or it's I surprise myself all, like, every time we do something new, or we start something new, or we start a new project, or get a new book, or work with a new. It's like, it's surprising to me. It's like, wow, like, look at what we're doing. Look where I started. I literally started off like in my daughter's bedroom. I got this an idea for a couple of stories. I started writing on a sheet of paper, like literally, like as my girls were playing around me, I just started writing. From there, we're here, and that is just incredible to me. So it really is like so much, so far beyond any like monetary or any publicity or anything like that happens to come our way. That's all just like icing. Everything is like about the depth of what we're doing and what we hope to do going forward.
And two things you said here, I keep hearing what I'm telling myself actually in a way. So I feel very happy when someone validates that, because one, of course, it's the love for, what you do, which takes precedence. But what you were both hitting on, which I can see why you work together, because it's like the big why, the motivator is, the impact you're finally making, the quality of the work, the how it touches people that it is going to. And I think, as a nonprofit, I can definitely say I'm in that space, and I really believe that there's no harm in saying that it will become a sustainable business, because that needs to happen for you to
Right.
take it further and to have a greater impact. But I genuinely believe this as a person, that when you focus on the quality and when you focus on making the impact, everything else follows, because you have to go in all in with your heart. And I'm kind of like going to remember the joke, Ambika, you were sharing, that, the only way you make money is when you come with money, which is true for every sector, I feel, but
It has
definitely true.
been the truth in publishing for hundreds of years. I mean, it's always been a rich person's game. They've brought in money and they've, made it happen. If you want to go the other way, like start with zero and try to build a publishing company, it's much harder, much, much harder.
Yeah, yeah, but you're here, you're doing it, which is what I love. And you were talking about impact, Suhani, and obviously, like, you've had personal impact. Both of you were like talking about children and parents and like those kinds of stories, which I'm sure you're going to remember forever, because those are moments that you always reflect on. But talk to me about, parents who are trying to use books as a way to connect, as a way to pass on heritage, because some of the work that you are producing definitely is allowing parents to sort of create that sense and, I guess, be seen. So if there is a parent hearing us right now, and what would you tell them? Where should they start? And you're both parents. Tell me how do you create a sense of belonging, especially for those parents who are kind of like staying away from their heritage cultures, or parents who might be like global parents, like we call them right now, who've lived in different places and who are now trying to make home or understand what their roots are. So, what would you say to parents like that?
I guess I can start. So I guess that the what I think about for my own kids is less so much finding, like, showing them like, oh, look, there's an example of you in the world, which obviously is important for them to be reflected in the world around them and like the media that they're seeing, whether it's books or TV or whatever. Um, but I think it's for me, it's more important to cultivate in them the understanding of how diverse and big the world really is and how full it is of different people. Because even though like Ambika and I look like one another, we look like essentially we should be from the same community background. We are completely different. We have a completely different upbringing. We're from different communities within India. We're from, we have different experiences that have shaped who we are. And I think for kids to really understand that they will never meet another, they may never meet another person in the world that are just like them, whether their experiences are different or their culture is different or some aspect of their identity is different. They're always going to be different, but that is the beauty of the world. They're not supposed to be like other people. Like the world is full of diversities in all different shapes and forms, and I think that is really important. So obviously it's like showing them, like pointing that out in the literature that they read, making sure that you're having those conversations with them when they feel that they're different in school, or when they feel like the other is saying like, yeah, you are, and that's okay. Like that, it's fine to be like, to be the only one that looks like you in a room. Like that's okay, because the world is bigger than that room. So I think just building that understanding is important for me as a parent.
I think, I mean, she said it almost perfectly. I think basically we don't want to see a flattening of who we are. We want to see that depth. We want to see that richness. We want to see that appreciation for the fact that we could all share some portion of our identity and yet be different in so many ways, and appreciate that without wanting to create a homogenous kind of picture of who we are. That was really what drove me to have Yali Books as a publishing company, because I wanted to build that broad bookshelf of South Asian voices. And at the same time, I wanted to find those threads of connection between those who identify as Desi or South Asian, and and I think going beyond to find those threads of connection with other people around the world. So whether it's love of family, or food, or whatever those things that connect us, is what makes us human. So I think that was really what drove us to build our companies.
I love that. And, I don't know if you guys watch too much films. I clearly watch a lot. So Richard Linklater, he's from Austin, Texas. So I'm going to quote him. He said, the more specific you are, the more generalized you become.
Oh, I
So
love that.
I love that quote simply because, every love story is the Romeo and Juliet or whatever you choose.
Correct.
But when you start adding nuances to it, which are as an artist that this is specific to my community, or this is what I would do different. Suddenly you start making it something different, but it's still at a universal level connects because the emotions are human.
Correct.
And so it doesn't matter if it's if I'm writing a Kashmiri story, if only Kashmiris are going to read it, that's not the point. The point is that the universality in emotions tends to be there if you write
Yeah.
a good story, but
Correct.
the specificity sort of makes it unique. And I hope kids across all ethnicities, it doesn't only just have to be South Asians reading South Asian
Correct.
books, they could be anyone. And I also enjoyed, Sohani, you were talking about how we are still different. Like, a lot of people tend to do this to the diaspora where they will say,
Correct.
these are all South Asians, therefore, like, it is going to be a mango in the summer and they can't get beyond that. And I'm like, we are all so different, and that's so true because it's a
Yeah,
billion plus people. How can they all be having the same experiences?
correct.
So that's very true. And maybe it's a slight, as you were saying, I kind of like, I'm almost as a writer, I want to ask you that question. As a publisher, when you are sort of evaluating work and you're like, okay, this is a good project for us to work on, what are some of the things that are important to you in terms of, like, what's a good book for this publishing house to work on? Is there something that you specifically want to see in upcoming work from the community as they draft work?
Yeah, so I think
I think that's an
each of our imprints has a very specific goal and mission. So, for example, Modern Marigold Books is all about sharing, stories that center social emotional growth, but through the lens of identity. And I think that includes a lot of early generation or immigrant experiences. But I think that is really what we focus on for Modern Marigold Books. And then for Yali Books, for the Yali Books imprint, our mission is to open windows to South Asia. So that really is being representative of all the micro communities and the diversity that really exists within South Asia. So when we're evaluating manuscripts for our company and for that could possibly fit into either imprint, it really is saying, like, how closely does this come to, how closely does this fit into the mission of either imprint? If it's something completely outside of these parameters, we're likely not focusing on that, because we need books that fit within each space to drive that imprint forward. But yeah, just really trying to find stories that have that authenticity, have that, that the authors are coming from a genuine place, that that they're sharing a very specific experience, I think is really, really important for us. Ambika, is there any way you'd like to elaborate?
I think this is an excellent question, because we spent a lot of
Yeah,
time
we
thinking
did.
about it. Suhani and I spent enormous amount of time, and our understanding has evolved as well. Like, what we started off with is not what we are doing right now. And I think the reason why it's evolved is because we realized, one, we have a certain pattern of thinking, and we tried to draw upon that, but we also discussed and debated and came to an answer. And I think what we are at the crux of what we are saying is we want a community focus. So what a story should speak to a small community. It could be micro. It doesn't have to be a large community, but it really should speak to them. It should be their story. It should really represent who they are, their values, their cultural systems, and so on. Once it has that specific micro community focus to it, it's going to speak to the larger world. So we can develop the universal values, we can develop the threads that connect, and so on. But we really want that focus. And I think that came out of like deep discussion. We spent a lot of time doing that. And we even looked at each other's imprints and said, okay, how does your focus differ from mine, and so on? And how have we built our companies? It took us a lot of time to arrive at the answer.
I love that though, because I mean, first of all, these are great discussions to have. But secondly, I think when you work together and bring two imprints together in this way that you have, I think it does require that kind of thinking,
Correct.
because obviously, like two people coming with different perspectives, it's kind of, it's fun. That's the fun part, but it's also hard work.
It
So I
is.
appreciate what you guys are doing. So now, Yali Books is like almost 10 years, is
Correct.
what I
This is our
heard.
10th
And
year.
so that's so cool. And so I would love for you guys both maybe to share snippets of, feedback from people who've read the books, and, something that still stays in your mind and you're like, this is good work. I enjoy doing this. Share with us something that you've heard that sort of stuck with you.
I think so many instances of people saying, "Oh my gosh, this is my story." When, for example, Ritu Vets Chandni, which was one of the first picture books to feature two brown brides, a Hindu ceremony, and so on. I mean, people were. I've gotten back people who were crying over the book. They were like, "Oh my gosh, this is our story. How come this has never been told? Why is this the first time we're seeing this?" So those kind of things stay with you. Like when people come back and say, you have my story, and you've brought it out into a book. And this is what I want to see in the world. Every instance of someone telling us that it brings me joy. I mean, that's why we do this. There's no other reason why we do this.
Yeah, I agree. I think two situations I can think of, and they both involve my debut book, which is Shreya's Very Own Style. I grew up with alopecia. I have alopecia till this day, which is an autoimmune condition that causes hair loss. And it's been such a huge part of my identity. I developed it when I was 4 years old. It really started being very visible in middle school, which is a very tough time in a kid's life. Like there's so much going on in middle school, like internally and externally with other kids and everything. A lot of growth during that time. So it was definitely very impactful on how I view myself. And so when the first book I wrote was this book that features this Indian girl who's growing up with alopecia and how she tries to hide it, and eventually by the end of the story has the confidence to just let people in and know about this part of her life. And I published the book during the pandemic, and so I did a lot of virtual events around the launch of the book. And one of the events was it was like a school district, and there were over 150 people, kids on this call. It was a huge, the biggest event that I'd done virtual ever. And I did the reading, I did the story time. The woman, the mother who had actually coordinated me to come in and talk to, she was from the PTA, and she was, she emailed me and she said, I just want to say that you probably didn't see her in the midst of all the kids who were on the call, but one of the girls in one of our classes is a 10-year-old girl who's Indian, who has alopecia, who loves soccer, and soccer is featured in the story. And so her mom, she said you should have seen her face when she was watching you tell this story and going through the book. She was she looked at her mom, she said, oh my God, I'm Shreya. Shreya's me. She just was so valid, and just so happened to be, and then other instances where kids get off of get off of a story time, and they're I always do this little activity with them afterwards. It's a self-portrait activity. And so when I ask questions before I do that, a boy's I'm self-conscious. I feel shy about my teeth sometimes, or I feel shy about my hair sometimes. So that universal message, when that really shines through, and that where kids understand the main character's emotions, not just her experience, but her emotions through this experience, and can relate to that. I think that is such a powerful moment for me, that, though they're not living with alopecia, though they're not, they don't look like this character at all or have her experiences, they can relate to her emotions. And I think that's a goal through all of my books, or the books that we publish, is having those relatable emotions.
Yeah, I love that story. And, I've never heard that story. I know I looked up, as I was following your work, I'm like, okay, I've never seen that ever. So I guess, even people who don't have that same condition, there's many ways that they can relate to it, because we don't see these stories out at all. And so this relatability aspect of I see myself, or it might remind me of some other thing that I have dealt with, or I'm reading Sayantini Dasgupta's book right now, and she talks about how the character says how we hold on to some stones in our lives, and we just have to keep them down at some point. And that was such a powerful statement to me, because we are all holding on to something that we don't even realize. And sometimes you read something or you see something, and then you're like, oh, I've been holding on to this for my entire life as well. And that moment of relatability is very powerful, and it connects.
Correct.
So I'm grateful for it. I love hearing this sort of reminds me of why this work is important, and that's why I like asking this question as well. And now, you guys have done this, for a while. There's a huge change, at least I see it as a reader, in, what's coming from the community. Lots of new kinds of creatives, lots of new focus. So would you like to share something that you're really looking forward to, or something that you're like, this is exciting that's happening coming up, and maybe it's from your own imprints or maybe from someone else like that you would like to spotlight or share?
Go ahead,
Um,
Ambika. It
you
doesn't
want to go
matter if
first,
you
Wadi?
want. I can. Yeah, I can speak to it. I mean,
Oh,
I get not a particular person comes to mind, but I do love what I'm seeing from the community. Like, oh, I can think of someone actually. I actually had the pleasure of working with an author. Her name is Anjali Jariwala. She published a beautiful, self-published a beautiful book. I helped her with the building of the book, I guess. But she ended up self-publishing it, and it's a story called "Why We Eat with Our Hands," and it really explores like this notion of like eating with your hands, and because in South Asian cultures we eat with our hands, and it's not just like the way we eat, but it's so deeply connected. There's like such a deep reason behind why we do everything, and so it really explores what that is, and um, it's for like a really young audience. And my daughters love the book, and it's like stories like that I think are so valuable. I think like um, self-publishing, the fact that it's become so accessible has opened up the doors for so many people to be able to share their stories, um, and also there's a lot of great resources out there. So to build a great book, like what do you need? Like there's so much information out there about like the steps that you would take and how to end up with a really professional book, how to really well edit the book, and all of the find an illustrator and all of that. So I think that has allowed for a lot of people who would have maybe found it hard to get published, traditionally published. Like they have a way to share their stories, and there's a lot of great content out there. So I think we're living in a great time. Like this is a great time. Like that's such a huge part of publishing is the self-publishing part of it, small press part of it too. So,
yeah.
oh my god, that's what I can think of.
I think a lot has changed in the 10 years. That's definitely 10 years that we've been in business. So much has changed. We were one of the very first few, Desi books or South Asian books out there. And then we have the biggest houses putting out multiple titles every year and so on. It's very exciting. It's exciting to see how much is out there. The representation is definitely on the rise. But I would still caution it. It's very far from where we want to be. And in terms of there is there are so many things that we need to question about who tells the stories, who gets to tell the stories, who is being left out of the conversation, what aspects of our culture or society are we not still bringing in from the margins. And this, I think, is still extremely important. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still in a place where, folks with privilege, and this includes us as well, folks with privilege get to tell the stories. But we have to work very hard to bring others in from the margin. I would say that Indian publishing or publishers in India are doing really exciting work. So I really look to them to see, okay, what does avant-garde publishing really look like? And I would say independent publishers in India are way ahead, light years ahead of what is going on here. Whenever I go to India, I try to pick up books because there's just so much exciting stuff coming from there. They're really pushing the envelope in terms of what can be done, and I'm hoping we'll get there in terms of the nuance, the work to be done to really truly include marginalized voices. It's one thing to say South Asian identity or representation, but it's a different thing to say we're bringing in underrepresented voices, and that requires a lot more work.
I cannot tell you how much you're speaking to my heart. When we do storytelling workshops, one of my literal charts to all kids or adults who are in those workshops is whose story is it to tell? I
Yeah,
ask them that question because people need to internalize what that means. And
correct.
I, as a community of like literally 300,000 people in a billion plus country, see that so often that there are so many people who write about Kashmir, for example. Very few have lived
Exactly.
experiences. Very few are from there because it's kind of sexy to write about some things, right? But
Correct.
then I'm like, this just it has so many loopholes when I read it as a reader, as
Yeah,
someone from the community, because I'm like, that's not how I would talk, or that's not how
yeah,
this would be, because then I'm like, this just feels off to me. And
correct.
get a lot of pushback from my own family saying, it's not your job to decide who writes which book, but I obviously have a response as a reader. And I
Correct.
think there's lots of, I guess, nuances when you think about communities, caste, class
There
in the
is.
Asian context. When we know people who are capable of telling their stories but just don't have the channels to do so, and then someone else sort of like decides to do that. And
Correct.
coming from large publications as well, like I don't know if we are doing enough to ask that question, like, is this your
Correct.
story? Like, are you the best person to tell the story? And I hope that we get to that spot where we are more mindful of it. And Suhani, you were talking about Anjali. She's been with us
Oh,
two
really?
times at least. I've
Oh, she's so
interviewed her, and I
awesome.
think that
How great.
Oh, excellent.
Go figure.
yeah, and yeah, as you were talking about it last year, we actually connected with her and like her
Yeah.
daughter Naila, and see how she inspired the story. I really do know that well. So, and my son is 4 now, so I'm
It's
definitely
a
going to bring that
lovely
book in when
story.
he
Yeah, she's
starts
done so well.
local.
It's something
Yeah.
I never like when she reached out to me, she's like, I have this idea for this book. I was like, all right, tell me about it. I was like, oh man, I never thought about something like this. But yes, it's so true because our kids are learning to eat with their hands at home and then they go to school and they're eating with a fork and spoon and then so it's and my kids love eating with their hands. Like they will like any chance they get because they feel like it's an activity and it's something they get to do with like a certain type of food and it's like this, it's like, and like the way to eat, there's like a very specific way you eat with your hands, not just like shoveling food in your mouth. There's like an art to it. So like practicing that and it's they just love it. They're like, man, this is such a cool part of our culture. We get to do this. Like this is really cool. So they've embraced it that way, which is amazing because growing up, I feel like I didn't look at it the same way. It's like, oh, don't like pick up a spoon, like don't eat with your hands. It was like if we were at an
Yep.
Indian restaurant and like someone were at the table and started eating with their hands, it would feel odd to us. But we're in an Indian restaurant. Like, why is it feeling odd to us?
Mhm.
So those are certain things that I grew up
Yeah.
like with certain sentiments about that are completely gone now because of the space I'm working in and having my own kids and wanting to teach them that they like we started out with like they have a space in the world that and they're unique in that and that's okay. So it's really interesting.
We are
You're
much more
hitting on
confident.
you're hitting on what could be its own podcast episode, because it's like our
Oh
colonialism,
yeah,
which we don't even realize
yeah.
is that. I mean,
Correct.
like, we don't even realize it, but then we are like, we've internalized so many things because growing up, like, if we were outside, even in India, you
Correct.
would not eat with your hands in a restaurant, was not considered appropriate. And
Really
so
Yeah.
now I feel like, why would we do like that? Yeah, it's
interesting.
very few places where you would think
Yeah,
it
I
would be
didn't
Yeah.
even know
okay.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, Ambika, I didn't want to break you. I know you were adding something.
No, I was saying it's so interesting how in a decade or two we are much more comfortable with our identity, and I think it's also because there's a lot more people here who look like us and who are comfortable with who they are. But it is wonderful. I'm so glad we're getting into a space of confidence and owning our identity and saying this is who we are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am so happy that you were able to get time out and have these wonderful conversations. I just feel happy. Like, that's my word for this episode, like, really joyful. So I appreciate you. And obviously, we'll stay connected. But I feel like, unless you have any parting thoughts, I'm going to hit the stop button on the recording anytime.
Yes, thank
We're
you.
very glad to have connected with you too. So thank you so
Thank you for
much
the
for having
opportunity.
us here.